Okay, it's time for the August book haul. Most of these books, well, they came from a variety of places. Locally, did a couple little road trips around the state and found some. And then, of course, online, there was some eBay lots where I found one especially good one. But let's just kind of get right into it. So I got Slave Planet by Lawrence M. Janifer here. This is a pyramid book. And I really want to read something from Janifer. I've got a couple of his books now. Curious to check him out. I've got Stellar 3. This is a anthology edited by Judy Lynn Del Rey. And I had found 1 and 2 and went into a local bookstore and saw they had number 3 in really good shape. And so these have some pretty good lineups usually. This one I saw there was a lot of authors I hadn't seen before, so those can be kind of fun to try out some new authors. So excited for that. Got an Avram Davidson, Mutiny in Space. This is from Pyramid Science Fiction. This is a little thin novel. I really need to read something from Avram Davidson soon. And then Brian Aldiss, Evil Earths. And originally, I had one of these other ones. I think there's like 3 that are like this. This is from Avon. And I thought it was a novel, but these are short stories that Aldiss edited. So I've got 2 of the 3 now. Okay, I got 2 novels here that are sort of co-written. Nightfall was originally a short story by Isaac Asimov, one of his most well-known. And as his health was failing, he got Robert Silverberg to write or turn some of his short stories into novels. This is one of them. And then this is another one here, The Ugly Little Boy. And so I've read the short stories of these, but I have yet to read the novels. And this here is one of my favorite Isaac Asimov short stories of all time, The Ugly Little Boy. Be really interested to see what Silverberg could do with the concept of that story with his skill in writing. So I definitely want to check that out at some point. Now we got the book of Fritz Leiber. This is from Daw, a collection of short stories. I've read quite a few short stories. I think there was some overlap in here, but there was a few in here that I hadn't read before. But that's the table of contents there. And I think he got a second book of Lieber by Daw as well. Then we have Stanislav Lem, Mortal Engines. And this is kind of a Avon or Bard book. And there's a whole kind of line with this livery. And I've got almost all of them now. This was one that I'm missing. I think I'm only missing 1 now to have that whole set. Then I've got a couple of these little galaxy science fiction novels. This is number 32, Address Centauri by F.L. Wallace. And we got some really old school cover art there. These were probably not made in the best quality, so if you find these galaxy science fiction novels, a lot of them are really beat up. Like this next one, this is Manly Wade Wellman, Twice in Time. And prior to this actual mass market format, they were actually publishing the novels right off of their magazine press. So it looked just like the digest magazines they were doing. They just published novels out of them. So those are kind of interesting. And then I'd been looking for this one for a long time. Philip Jose Farmer, Riverworld and Other Stories. I recently did a review of the whole Riverworld saga, and I left a video. You can look back a couple videos and you'll see that. I'm going to take a break from Riverworld for a little while, but I do want to eventually read this because there's some short stories that have to do with Riverworld in here. And then there's also some other short stories that Farmer wrote that I'd like to check out. Now, this is a really cool omnibus I found at my local bookstore. It's from Avon, and it's called The ABC of Science Fiction. And what they did, there's 26 short stories in here, and each author is a different letter of the alphabet. So you can see the lineup of authors there. They had one author for each letter of the alphabet. Some of the hard ones, of course, are like I, so they had Irving write that. And luckily we have a Zelazny to do the Z there. Okay, another anthology, a couple more here that I got. Legends 3. This is one of the first anthologies I ever read. It was edited by Robert Silverberg, and it's kind of a mix of science fiction and fantasy. It was originally published in one big fat hardback, I believe, and then when they went to paperback, they broke it up into 3 books. So 1, 2, and 3. I have 1 and 3 now, and I'm just missing 2. And this has some really famous short stories like Stephen King's, ones from The Dark Tower. I think there's a George R.R. Martin story that got published in the Legends. And it was so popular they even made a Legends 2 later. Then we got The Expert Dreamers. This is an anthology that was edited by Frederick Pohl. I've been going on quite the Frederick Pohl kick, and he was a major editor for Galaxy Magazine. And so I'm really curious to see what kind of short story collection or anthology he could put together. And so I found this one, and it's got a pretty good lineup here. That's the first page. And then bleeds into the second page there. So be eager to check that out at some point. Now we have a couple DAWs here from Brian N. Ball. Got Singularity Station. This is DAW number 84. It's in really good shape, nice bright yellow spine. And then Probability Planet. This is DAW number 40. Another one that I found in really good condition. Really good cover art there. It's got to be Kelly Freas. Let's just check real quick. Getting better at this. It takes practice. Yep, Kelly Freas. And this came out in 1973. Now this is one I know nothing about. This is Fire Throne Mountain by E. Rue Bixby. And this is a tower science fiction book. If anybody knows anything about this author or this book, let me know, because I've never seen anything from E. Rue Bixby. And you know, tower science fiction wasn't one of the biggest publishers back in the day. You just never know what you're going to get there. Okay, then The Web Between the Worlds by Charles Sheffield. Not too long ago, I read Fountains of Paradise by Arthur C. Clarke, and one of the big premise of that book is a space elevator. And some people had mentioned that this came out actually the same year, and it's another space elevator book. It just kind of randomly happened to come out the same year as Arthur C. Clarke's novel. And I had a whole box of books that I was going to donate, and I didn't realize that it was in there. When I was going through it, I kind of recognized the title, so I pulled it out, and I'm going to keep that one. I'm not going to donate it, because I'd be really curious to read that one, kind of compare it to The Fountains of Paradise. And then we got The Complete Enchanter by L. Sprague de Camp and Fletcher Pratt. This is from Ballantine Books, and this is kind of fantasy from what I can tell. I've really enjoyed L. Sprague de Camp's weirdness, and at some point I'd like to check this out. This is kind of an omnibus of a bunch of Enchanter books that they wrote. So you get it all here in one volume. Then we've got a few more timescapes here. Got John Sladek Roderick. And I am officially over 100 timescape books collected. There's 140 in total if you don't count the Star Trek ones, which I don't have a lot of desire to collect. The Iron Dream by Norman Spinrad. This is a book I read. It's very interesting. I think you could say that with anything Norman Spinrad writes. But I've got 3 different editions. All of the Iron Dream books are very collectible because they've just got some very interesting cover art. but I hadn't found that Timescape one until recently. Then Michael Cera, Soldier Boy. Don't know much about this one. So if anybody's read anything from Cera or read this book, go ahead and let me know. Another one here, The Life Ships it's co-written by Harry Harrison and Gordon R. Dixon. This is a pretty short book. I'd be interested to check this out sometime soon, because I have read a book from Dixon, but I haven't read anything from Harry Harrison yet. And then Robert Holstock, Where Time Winds Blows. And these were all pocket books, Timescape editions. Kind of some interesting artwork there. Okay, the last stack here. We're getting into some good ones. This one isn't in the best shape, but I've been kind of curious about this one. This is The Falling Woman by Pat Murphy. I can't remember. It probably says on here somewhere. But this either won a Hugo or a Nebula. This is the original paperback, so they probably didn't know it won yet. It came out in 1986. And I haven't read anything from Pat Murphy. And eventually I'd like to kind of go through more of the more recent Hugo and Nebula winners. Then we got Richard Matheson, Shock 3 by Berkeley Books. This one, I have Shock 1, I think. I think I'm just missing Shock 2. Short stories by Richard Matheson. I'm very curious about this one. This came in a lot from eBay. I didn't really know much about it. But this is To Walk the Night by William Sloane. And this book was originally written in like 1937, and then Del Rey reprinted it here. It's got some really cool artwork. If you look at some of the original artwork, though, I'm not sure, and I've read up a little bit about this, I'm not sure if this is science fiction or horror or what. I think it's more of a horror story with some science fiction elements, but I'm really curious to check this out, especially since it was written in 1937. And it looks like there's a foreword here, which could probably give me some extra context about this one. The foreword was written by Berkeley M. Jones in 1937, so maybe not. Then we got The Long Afternoon of Earth by Brian Aldiss. This is, I don't know which title came out first, but this is the same book as Hot House. This is the alternate title. This paperback here is from Signet Books. It's in really good condition. I really loved the novel Hot House, and all I had was like a modern Bain reprinting, so I'm really stoked to have like the very first US paperback of this one. Even though the cover is a bit lacking, but still it's a really great story. So I held this one out. I've been looking for Sand Kings by George R. R. Martin in this Timescape edition, and everyone online was asking between $40 to $50, and I saw someone post one for just over $30, and I was the only one that bid on it, and it actually was signed by George R. R. Martin. He signed it to someone, but I figured I got it cheaper than anyone else was asking at the time, and it came with the signature, so I went ahead and pulled the trigger on that from eBay. Then we got a Ballantine Adult Fantasy. I'm slowly collecting these. These can be hard to find. I'm not going out of my way to collect these, but if I see them out in the wild, I'm grabbing them. So this is The People of the Mist by H. Rider Haggard. I've only read one book from Haggard, and that was, is it The Moon Pool, I think? Did he write The Moon Pool? I think so, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Then this one is really cool. I found this old Berkeley horror at a local bookstore. This is The Skin Trade, and this one's pretty neat because it's edited by Douglas E. Winter, but it's got stories from Stephen King, Dan Simmons, and George R. R. Martin. And there's multiple stories from all of them except for Martin. And there's the lineup there. So I need to read more horror short stories. I'm kind of limited to Stephen King is really the only horror short stories I've read, but I really want to expand some of my horror reading. And then got the original Ballantine paperback of Frederick Pohl's Slave Ship. Doesn't have the best cover, but this is the first paperback that came out from Ballantine for 35 cents. This is one I'm really curious to read from Pohl. I think it was one of his first novels, if not his very first novel that he wrote on his own, if I remember right. But like I said, I've been on a Frederick Pohl kick and have really been loving everything I've read from him. Then another DAW that I found, Death's Master. This was at one of my local bookstores. It's not in the best shape, a little bit of a faded spine, a little bit of soiling on the back, but these 10th leaves are kind of hard to come by, especially some of these DAWs, so I was happy to pick this up for a couple bucks. And then down to the last three. So Mind of My Mind by Octavia E. Butler. This is the first U.S. paperback of this one from Avon, and I just recently read, what's it called? I forgot already. Pattern Master. And Pattern Master was Octavia Butler's very first published novel. This is her second published novel, so I'm going to be reading through these in order. So this is going to be the next Butler I'm going to read, probably sooner than later, because I really enjoyed Pattern Master. Then we got The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. I've read almost every single book or science fiction book Asimov has published, but I have yet to read this, and this is one of his most famous ones. It's on the list of the masterpieces of science fiction, this series that I'm reading through, so I'm almost to book 100 of 140, so I will be reading this within the next year for sure. And then the last book I got was Farewell Earth's Bliss by D.G. Compton. This seems to be a very expensive, hard to find book for some reason if you just try to buy it outright. I saw someone on eBay that had a lot of books and they just had this in there with like a buy it now for 15 or 20 bucks. And I think there was like 6 or 7 books. And so I pulled the trigger on it. There wasn't the greatest pictures. There's a little kind of ding down there, but I'll take it. It seems like this one goes for a lot more than that if you're just trying to find it. And it sounds like a very intriguing book, so definitely want to read this very soon as well. So that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.